Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devimatriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindebhyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chadharmasya Sarvadharma Sarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Majamam Ashmarachara Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Bhadrakali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Veda Vedanta Vedanga Veda Vedanga Vedanta Vijastana Evacha Shri Ganesha Sharada Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Jai Guru Jai Guru Jai Guru. So happy to continue our discussion on the Devi Gita from the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. The last few meetings, we had a couple of weeks off also. We've the Divine Mother Bhuvaneshwari, the Supreme Goddess Bhuvaneshwari, who declares herself in the last verse of the previous chapter 1 to be non-different from the Supreme Brahman, is continuing this revelation. To one of the questions that the gods, Himalayan, the gods have asked is to reveal the nature, the essential teachings of the Vedanta, right, and the path, as well as the path to union with her essential nature. So, and so in the opening verses of chapter 2, she starts with, before anything, I alone existed. And that's almost an identical type of verse, not the identical words, but to an Upanishad that also states, before anything, I alone existed, Brahman alone existed. So she declares herself to be that Brahman itself, right? So the question that's being discussed is, okay, we have Brahman, right? This grand philosophical idea of the immensity of being itself, right, as a substratum of everything, the supreme truth, right? And we have a world, right? A world of multiplicity, a world of name and form, a world of variegatedness, right? A world of duality, right? And we have to be careful we use the word duality. I'm constantly qualifying my use because in knowledge and philosophy, we use the term duality in my mind, I can think of about 6 different ways, right? And the most common way that we, in kind of the Hindu Vedanta type of way of thinking, we tend to use it is the material world or the experiential world of the world duality, as if everything is only 2 things, either black or white, or either good or bad, right? Either this or that. But actually, when we say the world duality, often the way we're using it in this particular usage is to use a world of variegatedness of all experience. And so we take 2 extremes, like hot and cold. In between those, you have every other manifestation of heat. We take good and bad, like moral or experiential judgments. We can have everything in between. So these are 2 extremes, right? But it's a way of saying the world of experience. And then there's an implied ontological duality of between us and the world. If we experience a world of multiplicity, that there seems to be a different sense of duality between us as not being identical with what we experience, right? And then we have to bring in this more philosophical idea of existence itself. How does what we experience, the world of name and form and multiplicity, and ourselves as a unit of, as a seemingly individual world, individual person experiencing the other in multiplicity, right? Foundational duality is the other, and then that other being all names and forms and shapes of multiplicity. Second use of the earlier use of duality, and how does that relate to? Is there one ultimate reality? If there is one ultimate reality, how does it relate? So the Devi is making bold statements, right? Because that I am that supreme Brahman, right? And then she's explaining how we get and her relationship to Jeev and Jagat, us as individuals, as well as the world of multiplicity, the world of experience. So let's just glance really quickly at a few verses that we discuss and use that to jump into our discussion here. Let's see here. So she's describing Maya. Just jumping back, we won't spend much time talking about we've already given classes on these verses, but still we have to remind ourselves, because these will of what she has said so far in this little section, because that will inform, I think, what she continues to say in the verses that we're contemplating and discussing today. Neither real nor unreal is this Maya, nor the both, for that could be incongruous, lacking such characteristic. This a definite entity has always subsisted. And then this is an important verse. This is kind of why I wanted to back up a little bit. As heat inheres in fire, as brilliance in the sun, as cool light in the moon, just so this Maya inheres firmly in me. So what the verse, we go back a few more verses, says that Maya is one Shakti of mine, some power of mine by which I create, right? I'm Brahman, Chit, she says, Chit, Sambit, Eka, Parabrahmeka, the one supreme Brahman. I am consciousness, I'm awareness, and I am the one supreme Brahman, without a second, right? Yet within me there is some power, some Shakti, my own power called Maya that creates. This is a classic example used. It's used in Vedanta. It's in Advaita Vedanta slightly differently than how it's used in Tantra. And Sri Ramakrishna used this analogy or example a lot. He says, like, you think of fire and its power to burn, or milk and its whiteness, water and its wetness, a snake and its wiggling motion, right? And you can't separate them. You can discuss them separately. You can mean only one. In our conception, we can think of, when I think of Brahman, not moving, not doing anything, just existence itself, I call that Brahman. But when I think it doing everything, as everything, being everything and doing everything, I call that Shakti, right? So we can think of them separately, but he says they're abed. They're actually, Brahman and Shakti are abed, right? Brahman and Kali, or Brahman and Shakti are abed, means non-different, right? They're identical, right? A positive way of saying non-different, not the different, is one thing. They're identical. So that's Sri Ramakrishna's, I think, a very radical view of the identity of Brahman and Maya, Brahman and Shakti, right? So the Devi Bhagavatam uses this language, perhaps not as forward and radically as Sri Ramakrishna does, but we can think of it a little bit like essence and quality, or excellent. 1 second here. I want to get ahead of myself here. 1 second, hold on. I thought I included that in my notes, but of essence and quality, right? Or like sun is the essence, the quality of the sun, or an adjunct of the sun, manifestation of the sun is heat. So the sun is not, heat is not exactly the sun. It's one with the sun, but not exactly the sun. So sometimes this tends to use kind of this argument. Anyway, we'll come back to this. Find my notes here. Sorry. Okay. Into that Maya, the actions of souls themselves and the ages eventually dissolve without distinction, as worldly concerns dissolve into sleep. Right. By uniting with this inherent power, I become the cosmic seed. This is what we discussed last week. Right. By obscuring me its own basis, his power is prone to defect. I think this is a beautiful. We spent a lot of time on this verse. The idea that as she, through this power of Maya, the one Brahman, or here the Devi, through her power of Maya, right? In Vedanta, we'd say Brahman and its inherent power, right? But in the Devi Gita, it's Bhuvaneshwari, who's not different from Brahman, and her inherent power, right? She's not the inherent power of Brahman. She's Brahman, who has an inherent power of Maya, right? So you have to think of this as a theologically sophisticated, or exalting the theological position of the Devi, right? She's not a Shakti of Brahman. She is Brahman, who has a Shakti called Maya, right? So there's a little thing we have to remember, right? But she says, as I create this world of name and form, it has a quality that it obscures me, which is its foundation. And we gave the example of a cloth, right? I spin a cloth, I make a cloth, but the cloth slowly hides me, the one who made the cloth, the one who wears the cloth, the one who reveals the cloth, like that, right? So that's a defect, an experiential defect of Maya, right? And through its associated with consciousness, Maya, connected with consciousness, is called the efficient cause. She is the one who creates this world or causes this world. Through its evolution into the visible realm, it is said to be the material cause. It is both material, and that's a big theme of the Devi Bhagavatam and the Devi Gita, is that the goddess is both the efficient cause, the creator, doer, or the one who's personally doing it, that sense, right, as well as material cause. She's also the one it's being done to, right? She's doing it to herself. She creates a world, but what's that world made out of? It's made out of herself. That's a common theme of the Devi Gita and of the Devi Bhagavatam, the mother text, considered throughout, right? So that's where we left off. So this is the verse we're on today. This is verse, I have to fit it all on the screen today, sorry. We're on verse 9 of chapter 2, right? And the picture I chose, this is from a famous art. I left his name, I didn't edit it out. Menu Andicius, I think is the way you pronounce it, or Dijcius. He's we've seen his art before, right? In our we've used that book Tantra by Johari. I'm forgetting his first name just now. It's part of our book. We've used some of his books before in other courses, right? In our subtle anatomy class, one of the assigned thing was, it's called chakras. Okay, sorry, chakras by forgetting his name right now, but he uses this artist throughout in his book, so you may recognize his style of art, right? And here, this painting, is a particular view of Maya. It's her, but it's considered a feminine Shakti, right? But she is a quality that bewilders. She's magic. She's creating a world of illusion where she creates a world and we lose ourselves in it. We lose her in it, right? So this is kind of that the magician creating magic. She's a magician and she is the magic, and that's one of the definitions that's used. That's one of the definitions. So the next two verses, the verses we're going to deal with tonight, right, are just various views of Maya, right? There's not just one view of Maya, there's many views of Maya, right? And we can take this list of views of Maya very formally, right? Nilakant, the traditional commentator on the Devi Gita, Devi Bhagavatam, right, and who's quoted a lot in the footnotes of our parent text here by T. Mackenzie Brown on the Devi Gita. He goes out of his way for each one of these, because it's a list, basically, you can imagine, it's literally a list. It's, a word, semicolon, next word, semicolon. That's how we put it in English, right? Of various ways that Maya has been thought of or defined, right? So because it's the importance of seeing the Devi Bhagavatam as a Vedic type text, right? And akin to the Vedas, and partaking of the prestige of the Vedic tradition, the Sanskrit Vedic tradition. So Nilakant gives, it's in a footnote in the book, in our commentary here, in one of the footnotes, a list. He just gives the verses. He doesn't give the verses, how each one of these is found in the Upanishads. This is from Taittiriya Upanishad. This word, like it says, it's known as, Maya is known as austerity, as tapas, or as tamaḥ, right, as darkness, as shakti, right, as jada, right. So these different words. So he makes sure he finds, or he shows us in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, verses that, even those verses don't exactly mention Maya, we can imply that perhaps what we later describe as Maya, the Upanishads and the Vedic Upanishads are describing something like that using these words, right? So it's showing the Vedic pedigree of the text, right? That the Divine Mother herself is quoting the Upanishads, so she could say, in this Upanishad, Maya is called austerity. In this Upanishad, she's called darkness. In this Upanishad, she's called dullness, like this, right? Right. We can think like that, and I've found those verses, all book one. I went searching some of our library texts, and then online, using online Sanskrit documents that are available online. I was able to find most of the verses, all book one, I'm sure like one exists. I couldn't find it. I don't have it, and I couldn't find it from one of the Upanishads. I'll get there in my notes momentarily. So though that's interesting, and we can see how the thing we're discussing has been discussed in the Upanishads. And that's one of her questions. What's one of the questions to the goddess is, explain to us your nature as revealed in the Upanishads, right? So this is one way you can answer. This Upanishad I've known as this, or this Shakti of mine that creates a world or seems to create a world is known as this, is known as this, is known as this. So we can look at that. I will look at that. We can also look at each one of these words, not so tied just to a verse as type of discussions as I'm losing the word for the word, discourse, categories of discourse we can think of Maya, with different schools of thought, different temperaments, different ways of looking at the world, different worldviews. We'll discuss what here is being described as Maya, right? And the way she's describing Maya has been discussed in many different ways. We can think of that's the core point. One second here. I have to clear my screen a little bit. I can't see my own verses here. One second. Okay. So this is the verse. This is verse. If you want to see the Sanskrit, in my screen it's a little big, so I don't know if everything's fitting on the screen properly, but I want to be able to read it. Right. Kecit-jaḍaṃ tapa ityāhus-tamaḥ, kecij-jaḍaṃ pare, māyāṃ pradhānaṃ cha prakṛtiṃ, śakti-mapyajām. Some call kecit. Let me find my verse here, my notes. Kecit. Kecit means it starts some people. So this is just like some people call her this. Other people call her this. Her, the term is used, her is referring to Maya, right? And it's her, it's Shakti, it's a Shakti. Shakti is a feminine word, therefore it has to it has to match the he, she, or it has to match. And so Shakti is her. But also, whose Shakti is it? It's her Shakti, right? And this is an important point, because sometimes we make one view of Shakti is that it's a quality or a power of somebody. This is the devotional view of Shakti. Ishvara, God, has power. And we have this term Shakti and Shakti, not mentioned here, but Shakti and Shakti-man. Shakti is energy. Shakti-man is the energetic, the wielder of energy, right? The source of energy, right? The energetic, right? So in the example of the sun, if heat is an energy of the sun is primary, and the heat is secondary, right? And so the idea that Shakti is a power, when in the devotional schools, Shakti is a power inherent that's controlled by Ishvara, by God, right? And very often you have these pairs of Shiva Shakti, Lakshmi Narayana, Shiva Parvati, the divine couple in our traditions is often that you have the deity, the main deity, and his power, his Shakti, right? So this text, being a pretty strong Shakti text, right, which holds Shakti or the goddess as supreme, right? She is the powerful and she is power. So she is a powerful and power itself, right? She's not the energy of a male deity. She is the deity, right? So she and so Maya is her own power, one of her powers. She has unlimited powers, Ananta Shakti, right? So one of her powers is Shakti, right? She's Shakti, she's Shakti-man, and she has a Shakti called Maya, right? So the her both refers to Maya as a feminine Shakti power, and also refers that she's identified also with Maya, at least in these verses, right? Some call this Maya kecit-jaḍaṃ. Tam is her, right? In C. Mackenzie Brown's translation, we're leaving it just for the sake of completeness as a document, as we're using primarily his English, right? But it leaves some things out. Some call this Maya the power of austerity. Some call this Maya, it should say, I think, some call her right? Her, Maya is her. Some call her, and we know who's being talked about, Maya. So he supplies the missing subject, Maya, right? But in so doing, I think we may lose the fact that it's her. And I would put her even in a capital H, right? Her, right? Some call her, or this Maya, right? Tapaha. Tapa means austerity, right? Some call, here he says about the power of austerity. Others call what is it? Ityāhus. Here, iti probably is like quotation marks. It's like this is various things that are people say, right? Ahu is, they call her or describe, they say or call her, they nominate her. So others describe it as tama means darkness. So already you have put these two next to each other. Some call her austerity, and tapa means heat or fire of austerity, right? And even the gods themselves earlier in chapter 1 describe her as the color shining like the agnim. What is that verse from the we read that she is the color of fire. Magni Jwalantim, something like, I'm forgetting just now. It started and then I lost it, but it's one of our verses that we've spent quite a bit of talking about. She is the fire of austerity, the color of fire, the color of austerity. And then we read many verses from the Upanishads describing how from austerity, from heat, right, this world springs into being, right? I'll read those verses, a couple verses in a moment. Actually, I'll jump. I'm going to read so not to lose it. This is from actually. So this is benefiting from Nilakanta's references, right? So an example, some call her tapas or fire of austerity, the shakti here, the power of austerity, right? So this is from an example of this is from the Mandakya Upanishad. 1:1, 8-9, 8 and 9. We've read these verses before in this course, right? In this class, right? Tapasa chiyate Brahma, right? By tapas, Brahman increased in size. By tapas, he expanded, right? So this is how you get one becoming many. So he expanded. By tapas, he increased, Brahman increased in size, and from it food is produced. From food, the prana, the mind, the bhutas, the world, karma, and with it, its fruits, right? From Brahman, who knows all and everything of all, and whose tapas is the nature, and whose tapas is in the nature of knowledge, this Brahma, name, form, and food are produced. This is little dense and awkward Vedic Upanishadic language, but the main point is from tapas, from heat, from austerity, she creates. Brahman expands. So this is an example that some are calling her Maya tapas, the energetic power, right, of austerity, right? And we have this idea of the goddess as tapas throughout, and Devi Shuktam, it's there, the verse earlier in this hymn, in this text, quoting from Devi Shuktam, now remembering. And many places you have the idea of sacrifice or of tapas throughout. So this is an example. So that's one extreme. Let's go to the other thing. Some are calling her tama, darkness. So tapas is the blazing fire, right? The blazing light and fire of and heat caused by fire, by austerity. Excuse me. So, but others look at them, and so we can. So let's. So I'm a little bit of. I'm the last few days. I have to warn you a little bit because my mind's in a particular mood, right? We're a moody philosopher, right? And sometimes philosophical, the sublime and extremely sublime, sophisticated teachings of the Hindu scripture, the Puranas and the Upanishads, and the different schools of Vedanta and the different categories of Tantra and the 6 systems of philosophy and Buddhism, and it's all very fascinating. It's very, very impressive, right? But sometimes we get lost. We can get lost in just philosophical speculation, right? As if this is really that important. So for some of us who like justification and try to understand stuff, it seems to be important, right? But I think for most people, they don't have to think. Most Hindus, most devotees, most religionists, most spiritual people, most people don't have to think that the world we're experiencing, does it come from the fiery heat of Brahman's austerity, or is it the nature of darkness? Right, so it may be philosophically it may not be that important, although this is we're dealing with philosophy here, so we'll face it and go through, kind of inch our way through it, see what's being revealed. The question is a philosophical question. Please reveal your nature as per the essence of the Vedas, the Upanishads. So that's what she's doing. She's answering a philosophical question with philosophical revelation, right? Content. Right. But we can take this more humanly, more simply, right? We look out at this world, what do we see? We can see the world in so many different ways. These are listing different ways, not just different verses of the Upanishads that are developed into philosophical thoughts, right? But ways to see the world, right? We can see the world as, think about to see the world as coming from the heat of the austerity, the ascetic practice of Brahman itself, within its own self-contemplation, creates heat, and from that heat a world is created, and all the elements and food and the elements and everything is created. That then look at the world, imagine the world this way. That's a very powerful worldview, I think, right? A view of the world, right? You can also look at this world and see darkness, right? That's another possible view. It's a legitimate view but of course we see the world not as darkness, we see it lit up. But is it lit up? If something is lit up, the thing before it's lit up is dark. If I just happen to have a flashlight because there's my if I shine a flashlight on something, because I planned a flashlight on something, like, oh, this is all lit up, right? That means that this is the thing that's lit up, is without the light is dark, right? So we could see the world as darkness until light is shined on it. Right. So what's that light? The light of consciousness, the light of awareness, something like this, right? Right. Without the light of awareness, everything we see, this world, right, is full of darkness, right? Because it is not conscious, right? So this is a question whether this world is itself conscious, right? The goddess in the next couple verses, the next section, after tonight's discussion, our next meeting will be on she'll start describing the world as the objective world, right, as not conscious, right, as a particular way of looking at answering in a very Vedantic, Advaita Vedantic, Upanishadic way, right? She'll answer this question. She'll describe the world. She'll teach Vedanta, right, in a few verses, right? To know the distinction between that which is aware and not aware, that which is a subject and that which is an object. By saying it is dark, it could be a way of saying it is an object, that without the light of the subject's consciousness would not shine, right? It has no light in itself. It only shines. It's revealed when the light is shined on it, right? So, but anyways, there is a verse that Nilakanta mentions. Let's see here. This is from the Rig Veda, the hymn known as the Hymn of Creation. This is from the way the Rig Veda is organized. It's 10:129 verse 3. You can look it up just using that, but Rig Veda 10:129 3. You can find it in the Veda, in the Vedic text spaces that are there, right? Tamaha asit tamasa tama ashit tamasya guhalam agre. So this means at first there was only darkness, wrapped in darkness. So this is a different way of understanding this verse. I was using darkness as something that needs to be lit up, but here this is a cosmological creation hymn, right? And we have a similar verse, perhaps biblical verse, that there was only darkness, right? And then God created light, right? And there was light, right? From darkness there was light, right? So from the primordial darkness, right? At first there was only darkness wrapped in darkness, darkness wrapped in darkness, right? All this was only unilluminated cosmic water. The material world, right? This whole world is only darkness, unilluminated cosmic water. This is that one which came to be, enclosed in nothing, arose at last, born by the power of knowledge. So these are just examples of these Vedic mantras that are illustrating something like that, these ideas. Some call this Maya tapas, others call it tama, darkness. Still others call it jada. Jada means inert, motionless, unintelligent, right? Matter, right? It means it can be matter, because why do we say it's? There's another word actually in this list. Another word, pradhānaṃ, is also a word from matter in the next half line, right? But so jada can also be matter, because matter, one of the qualities of matter, generally understood, is that it's inert, right? It's unconscious. It means it's unintelligent. It doesn't have intelligence. And also jada, a foolish person, it can also be called jada, right? He's foolish, or he's with no intelligence, right? But here it means it's really jada means like dead matter, right? Inert, motionless, right? So it's another way of saying, what is this Maya we look out at? We see, this is also not dissimilar from the way I'm fleshing out the idea of tama. The idea of tama, everything's dark unless the light of consciousness is on it. Here, everything is inert, right? That which is the moving. We can think of it this way. And this is a little bit using perhaps a little bit of the Sankhya kind of conception of Purusha Prakriti in a certain sense, right? That Prakriti, right, or is jada also. It is unconscious, right? Yet it moves. It is inert, yet it moves. It moves because there's something conscious. There's something acting upon it, right? So this world of Maya, this world of experience, without the light of awareness, without Purusha, or the light of consciousness, right, or the conscious entity, it wouldn't express, right? And so there's a couple ways we can think of this. One is that it doesn't express; it's always inert. Nothing in this world moves, right? It's unconscious and unmoving, right? And actually, we're the mover. We're conscious, right? We see things moving. We are attributing movement to that which isn't moving, because we're moving. We're conscious, right? And the other view is that we move it, or consciousness moves it. Life moves it. And the example in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this example is used several times. I love it. Just says, like the sun shining on snow. This is the line that's in the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? What does that mean? The sun shines on snow, on ice, and the ice melts, right? And when the ice melts, it moves and flows into water and becomes a river. So the sun does nothing. It simply shines. It's not moving the river, right? But it is the energy of the sun acting upon and then the inert water that moves the river. So it is doing, right? It is the cause of something. It's because of the light and the heat of the sun shining on the jada of ice, on the unmoving water, that makes it move. But then it's moving, but it doesn't mean that it's not moving itself. Something is moving it, right? So it's still inert. It's not like now the water thinks, oh look, I'm moving on my own, right? It can't think that, and it can't do that. It's jada. It's unintelligent, and it's non-moving, inert. Unless something moves, it seems to move when consciousness is applied to it, right? So this is one way to think of this world also. We see this world like that. It's unmoving, it's dark, it's unmoving, it's unintelligent, seems to move, it is lit up, seems to move, and seems to be conscious when consciousness is connected to it. So that's one way, another way to possibly see this world, right? So some call this Maya tapa, austerity, others call it darkness, tama, still others jada, dullness. This pare means others, right? Then a few more, and then this is just a quicker, even a more intense list. māyāṃ pradhānaṃ cha prakṛtiṃ śakti-mapyajām, or knowledge, illusion, matter, nature, energy, or the unborn. These are all different views found in the scriptures as per Nilakanta's commentary, right? Or we can think of it that way, or just we can see these are different views, different ways. And even I can think of Maya or the world of experience, right, in all these ways, right? And they make sense in a certain way, right? None of them are maybe sufficient and not fully satisfying, right? But I don't need to be fully satisfied. Like I said, the philosophical parts of Hinduism may not be as essential as we always think, right? But they're still beautiful. There are views of the world that are satisfying, and some more satisfying to some than others. Intellectually satisfying, personally satisfying, matching our views, our experiences, our beliefs, perhaps, right? Right. So let's say it says māyāṃ pradhānaṃ cha prakṛtiṃ śakti-mapyajām. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything here. Oh, I am missing a word. I'm sorry. I was thinking I'm actually before the word māyāṃ, it should say jñānaṃ. Jñānaṃ. Another, and when I created this slide, I think when I copied from my notes and pasted them, looking at it says jñānaṃ māyāṃ pradhānaṃ cha prakṛtiṃ śakti-mapyajām. Jnanam. So some call Maya jnana, which means knowledge, right? So in the previous half verse, it says some call it darkness, some call it dullness. Now some call it knowledge, jnana, right? And then I think, let's see if I have a verse, if he gives a verse for that. 1 second here. The Aitreya, so this is a verse, an example of some Upanishads, the Vedic Upanishads describing Maya as, or something that could be described as Maya, similar to this topic of discussion, as jnana. This is from the Aitareya Upanishad 3.1.2, also searchable if you want to look at the verse and think about it, right? I'll read. I have the Sanskrit here, but it's a long verse. I'll read the gist of it. But the term here is let's see. It says in this heart, in this intellect, and this mind that were stated earlier, it is sentience, consciousness, right? Rulership, secular knowledge, presence of mind, retentiveness, sense perception, fortitude, thinking, genius, mental suffering, memory, ascertainment, resolution, life activities, hankering, passion, all others. These are all the things we see. This is the world. These are examples of what we are experiencing in the world. So all these are verily are the names of prajna. Right here, the word is prajna, or knowledge. Prajna means knowledge in this particular verse, right? Or consciousness, right? So these are all examples of consciousness or of knowledge, right? All what we see all comes from the. So he's Nilakanta is showing a verse that uses this term, uses meda and a few other terms like this. So this world that we see is jnana. This is knowledge creates this world, right? You can see that's also our experience. Without knowledge, we wouldn't see a world. We know a world, right? And you can see maybe there's I mean, I don't want to be aggressive in interpreting ancient text. I am aggressive in interpreting ancient text, but there's a way of interpreting some yogis and Vedantis of a particular era, right, that were giving yogic and Vedantic interpretations of the biblical stories, right? The Adam and Eve story also come that we see this world when we have knowledge. Knowledge, that the fall is knowledge. We have knowledge of the world of duality. From do not eat from the tree of the of knowledge, right? What is that knowledge? The knowledge of separation of good and evil, right? And therefore, it's sort of by knowledge, we understand we enter the world of multiplicity and experience, right? Of good and evil, right? Of duality. That's the classic nature of duality, right? Jñānaṃ, pradhānaṃ. Let's see here. Pradhāna also means matter, right? So I think because the missing word. A missing word I keep tripping on it. Jnana, Maya, pradhāna. So jnana and Maya. So some call Maya. That's what he's saying. Some call Maya jnana, some call Maya, right? And so because of the juxtaposition between jnana and Maya, he's showing knowledge and illusion. So that the translator is giving saying that this is the kind of Advaitic type of view of Maya as illusion, right? But anyway, some call Maya, some call it knowledge, some call Maya, obviously, but it's an important point to list that, because that which is being described, she calls it Maya. That we can see, what does the Devi call it? The Devi calls it Maya. Right? I have a power one of my own powers that's inherent in me, known as Maya, right? She describes the power by which she creates the world, right? And everything in it, the world of duality, the world of experience, and ourselves included, by the power of Maya, right? So we should also list that, right? Some call it Maya, some call it darkness, some call it dullness, some call it knowledge, some call it Maya, right? So she calls it Maya, but what does Maya mean? Of course, this is what's being discussed. Some call it pradhāna. Pradhāna here means matter, I mentioned, right? It means matter, it means material energy. It means pradhāna actually means primary. The term means primary, right? Like if we were to, I use, like, for the school, for the seminary, trying to figure out what do you use the head of a seminary. You use a president, you can use chancellor, right? The word we use is dean, right? The head of a school, right? So that's the English, but what's the equivalent in Sanskrit, right? There are certain, one is pradhānacārya, right? The head teacher, primary teacher, right? So if we were to give a translation, right? The word we're using for dean is a translation of a term, pradhānacārya, the head teacher, the head teacher of a school is called pradhānacārya. So pradhāna means primary there, right? Means foremost, right? So therefore, but how does it mean foremost and also mean material nature, right? This is a term being used a lot in Sankhya, right? That prakriti is known as pradhāna, right? The foundational, prakriti, its foundational principles, pradhāna, right? This primordial matter that, by the influence of Purusha, seems to evolves and changes into the evolutes of the 24 evolutes, like this, right? So this could be a reference to Sankhya way of looking at it. We look out the world, what is it? This is the primordial matter that we're seeing. The Maya we see, the world that we see, is primordial matter, right? Let's see if I have a verse from the Shweta-svataru Upanishad, right? Verse 1, chapter 1, verse 10. It says, I don't have this one. I don't have the Sanskrit. I just found it in translation. The version I couldn't find one was the Sanskrit to show you what the word is, but we know what it is. The perishable. What is perishable? That which doesn't. The definition of Brahman mentioned in that Shankaracharya gives of truth is that which is imperishable, without beginning, without end, unchanging, right? Has no support, right? The imperishable, right? So the perishable, that means, so Brahman is the imperishable. Maya, the world we see, is the perishable. That's the words being used. The perishable is the primordial matter. The perishable is pradhāna. That's the words being used. That I know. This is what's being described, right? The perishable world is nothing but pradhāna. The matter, primordial matter, is the perishable experience, right? The immortal and the imperishable, right, is para. This particular Upanishad has a strong Shaivite character, right? So the perishable is pradhānaṃ, the imperishable is hara, is Shiva, right? This one God, Shiva, rules over the perishable matter and the imperishable. What's the imperishable? The soul, right? The imperishable, the soul. We are also an aspect of Shiva in this idea. So we're imperishable. We're non-different from Shiva, from Brahman. But the world, we see the body and the world is changing and perishable, right? And Shiva is a master of both the individual soul, right? Right, the jiva, the imperishable, as well as the perishable matter, pradhānaṃ. By meditating upon him, uniting with him, through the constant practice of reflecting upon his nature, one can overcome the ubiquitous maya of this world, right? By meditating upon Shiva, or here in this our text, we would say, by meditating upon Bhuvaneshwari, we can overcome, if that's what we're trying to do, the ubiquitous maya, this world of the lost in pradhānaṃ, in the corporeal matter. This is an example of some who call her maya matter, pradhānaṃ. Some call and then prakriti. Some call her prakriti, right? Of course, the most common people who call it prakriti are the Samkhyas, right? Samkhya philosophers, right? That hold that this world, all we see is prakriti. There's Purusha, the conscious entity, and Prakriti, material nature, pradhānaṃ, right? That through the influence of the presence and the association with Prakriti, with Purusha, right? Prakriti begins to agitate and evolve, right? Change, right? Begins to act. Very similar to the example I gave of the sun shining on ice and causing it to melt, right? And so this is an example. Also in the Śaiva-śāstra-viśāradāḥ Upanishad, right, chapter 4, verse 10, this is provided by Nilakanta. Māyāṃ tu prakṛtiṃ vidyam, māyāṃ tu maheshwaram. So this is using the exact word. Know then that prakriti, or nature, here described nature, right, is maya. Right, that's an example of those who call, this is not just the Samkhyas who call maya prakriti. The Upanishads will also say, when we say prakriti, what the Samkhyas are improperly saying, calling it, describing it, but the Upanishad itself describes nature. We see we see is prakriti, or nature is maya, right? And the great Lord, remember this is the same Upanishad as Shiva is the great Lord, is Maheshwara, right? Is Mayan. So this world, nature, Prakriti is Maya, and Ishwara or Maheshwara, right? Shiva is Mayan. Mayan means the controller of Maya. The world is nature, the world is Prakriti, and he is the controller of Prakriti. The Lord of, so that's a very, very theistic type of way of thinking of it, right? The whole universe is filled with objects which are part of his being. This whole world of Prakriti, the evolved Prakriti, is his being. So we could convert this to this text, to our Shakta text. This whole world is Maya, right? And she, not he, is Mayan. She's the controller of Maya. That's what's being said in many ways here, right? And this whole world is filled with objects we see, right, that are part of her being, right? So we could say like that. So jñānaṃ, māyāṃ, pradhānaṃ, jnana, maya, pradhānaṃ, prakriti, shakti. So some call her Shakti, some call her energy, right? So obviously we're Shakti. I mean, I can't say we because I don't know what you are. And I'm also complicated, lineagely complicated, and but we can generally say that we're interpreting. This is a Shakta text. We're interpreting it through the view of a general non-sectarian Shaktism, right? Which is in the light of Sri Ramakrishna, right? So we're taking, this is where goddess worshippers, what that means, that we within that Shakti is seen as worthy of worship, but even not just that, not worthy of being overcome, but really being worshipped, but even as a source of everything, the goal of everything, the one that helps us overcome, the one we can find. Shakti is supreme. She is not just Maya. She is not just Shakti. Shakti is also Shaktiman, right? She's not just Maya. She is Mayan, right? The controller of Maya. Right? She's a wielder of Shakti, right? So that's that could be one way of thinking of Shaktism, right? Those who worship Shakti, right? Not just Shakti. Oh, you can see, though, if we think of Shakti or Maya as the energy of God, then those who worship the energy of God are not worshiping God. That's the view, right? So Shaktas aren't those who are not worshiping God. Shaktas are those that believe that God is energy and energetic both, right? That the energy is also either identical with the energetic, or even the energetic is itself Shakti, is self-energy. So some call this Maya Shakti, right? So an example of the Upanishad that describe her as thus. This is from the Aganda Shveta Upanishad, chapter 6, verse 8. I'll read the English translation. He is without a body or organs, none like him, none like unto him is seen, or better than he, describing the nature of Shiva. The Vedas speak of his exalted power, which is innate and capable of producing diverse effects, and also of his omniscience and might. The Vedas speak of his exalted power. Parasya Shaktir vividhaiva shruyate, right? The Vedas, the Shruti, describe his exalted, his power, that power, right? The innate power is capable of producing diverse effects. What's that of diverse effects? The world of name and form, describing Jeev Jagat, right? Us and all living beings, right? He has power. That power, that tremendous power produces diverse effects, produces a world of experience versus Maya. Right, so there's an example of Vedic verse, a Upanishadic verse, where that which being described, how the one becomes many, the Devi describing as Maya, is also called Shakti, even the Upanishads, right? What to speak of in Tantra and in Shaktism, then it's overtly what we're describing, what Vedanta and others call Maya, or what is it, tapa and jada and tamaha and jnānaṃ and māyāṃ, pradhānaṃ, prakṛtiṃ, right? Shaktas and tantrics very easily call that Shakti, right? That's an important point. Okay, here. Next. Shakti, and then mapyaja. Mapyaja means birthless, right? Some call it Maya, her. We'll use her because actually she uses tam, right? So let's call it her. I keep mistaking falling into this language, right? Some call her unborn, right? Mapyaja. See if there's a verse for that. Also from the same Upanishad, chapter 4, verse 5. Ajam ekam lohita shukla krishnam bhavihi rajaha. So I mean, ajam ekam, there is ekam, one, ajaha, unborn, right? Lohita shukla krishnam, red, white, and black. There is one unborn, red, white, and black. Red, white, and black means the three gunas: rajas, tamas, and rajas, tamas, and satyam. No, yeah, sattva. Sorry, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Right here described as red, white, and black. Right. There is one unborn power. Right. Ekam, ajam ekam. of 3 colors, right? Which gives birth to many creatures like itself. So there's one power that is prakriti, described in Sankhya as prakriti, having 3 gunas, 3 powers that go to create many, many things, right? Gives birth to many creatures like itself. An unborn individual soul becomes attached to it and enjoys it. So we are also unborn. We're ajam, right? And we're attracted. This is our how we get caught into this world as per this Upanishad, per this verse, right? We get attracted. We're unborn, and we get attracted to an unborn, also uncaused, unborn prakriti. The idea also in Sankhya, which is maybe using the language of Sankhya, is that Purusha and Prakriti are both eternal, right? Awareness, the living conscious being, the Purusha, and material nature are both eternal, right? And the eternal Purusha gets attracted to the eternal Prakriti and then thinks itself, and because of that connection, Prakriti begins to act, and we think, oh, it must be us, and that's our identification, right? An unborn individual soul becomes attached to it and enjoys it, while another unborn individual soul leaves it after his enjoyment is complete. So this is how we come in and out of bodies. So here's an example of using that describing, although we are eternal, we're taking birth after birth, entering bodies, leaving the world, leaving the world, right? The world is not us, but the world is also eternal in a certain sense. That here, the idea that Maya is also eternal. Some hold. This is an example of some who hold that idea. Well, let's go into the next verse here. Let me read. Some call this Maya the power of austerities. Others call it darkness. Still others dullness, or knowledge, illusion, matter, nature, energy, or the unborn. It's a beautiful list, right? And we can see out into this world and see the world perhaps this way. What's the world we live in? What's the explanation of it, right? If there's one God, if there's one reality, how is this world? What is this world of multiplicity and our separate existence and separate knowledge like this, right? And our relation to it. All these ways are ways we can see this. Legitimate ways, not legitimate ways. These are ways described even in the Upanishads. This is what the claim is, right? Right. So this verse, this is chapter 2, verse 10. I like this verse very much. Vimarśa iti-tam prāhuḥ śaiva-śāstra-viśāradāḥ avidyāmitare prāhur-veda-tattvārtha-cintakāḥ. So now it's described. First, it listed all these different views of Maya, right? Now it's going to hone down to 2 powerful views, very famous views, right? One is that of Shaiva scriptures, Shaiva tantras. We can say that this verse. Instead, well, I'll read the translation. Those verse in Shaiva works call it. He uses the word intelligence. I'm not satisfied. That doesn't give enough. I don't think it gives enough of the meaning. So I've given the Sanskrit word vimarśa, and not to lose what he's translated. Intelligence isn't wrong, but it's not sufficient to, I don't think, to fully comprehend the distinction between the 2 schools of thought, right? And then, while the Vedantins call it ignorance, avidya. So these are 2 very different. These are 2 very popular in the ancient world, very popular and competitive views of Maya, right? The one we'd say by the Shaivite work, śaiva-śāstra, those who know the Shaivite scriptures, right? Shaiva scriptures here, most likely we could. Right now, there's a resurgence, and beautifully so, of Shaivite scriptures, Shaivite tantras, agamas, and the like. Especially the teachings of the commentaries of Avidyāmitare, of we known as Kashmiri Shaivism, Thika Shaivism, like this, right? So this may be referring to this Shaivite tantric perspective, right? And comparing it to the Vedantic. Here, Vedantic means Advaita Vedanta, Upanishadic Vedanta, Upanishads, and those who contemplate the Upanishads are here most likely meaning Advaita, the Advaita, the classical schools of Advaita Vedanta. So in the previous verse, the term used for say was ahu, ahus, right? Ahu means to say. Some call. Some call her this, some call her this, some call her that. Here is prāhu, pra-ahu, right? So pra is emphasizes it, right? Points it, right? So prāhu means we're not just calling it, some declare this. So these two schools boldly declare, right, that Maya is vimarśa or Maya is avidya. These aren't just different ways of describing something. They're declared, right? These are the strong teachings, the conclusions, right? The pointed teachings, right? So śaiva-śāstra-viśāradāḥ. Viśāradāḥ means those who are skilled, proficient, those who are expert, those who know, who understand, and who teach śaiva-śāstra, the Shaiva teachings, right? The Shaiva, he says Shaiva works, Shastra means works, means books, but here we could just say the Shaivite scriptures. So we could say Shaivites, let's just say that. But of course, there's Shaivites that don't think this. So it's specifically the fact that it's talking about vimarśa, some call Maya vimarśa, means this is really the tantric, Shaivite tantric, especially of the Kashmiri non-dualistic monistic forms of Kashmir Shaivism, I think are good ancient world descriptions, and I'm very happy that there's as more and more texts of this school of thought are translated, right? We have another way of looking at Maya and of the world and of non-duality, more than what we've heard until recently, with the popularity, both, I mean, since medieval times in India, and then into modern times, you know, and losing the word, but in the contemporary time, there's popularity of Advaita Vedanta. We've almost only been exposed to Advaita Vedanta. There's more than just one way of looking at non-duality, and there's not more than one sophisticated philosophical school and view, right? So anyway, so this is in one verse, half a verse, mentioning that the Shaivites describe Maya as vimarśa. We have to think what vimarśa is. Here he's translated as intelligence, and the Vedantists, the Advaita Vedantists, describe it as avidya. And the term for Vedanta is very interesting. Avidyāmitare prāhuḥ-veda-tattvārtha, right? And so Veda-tattvārtha, Veda-tattvārtha, you can put the three words are put together, right? Veda-tattvārtha, right? Itself has a meaning. It means the true doctrines of the Vedas. So that's a humble way of saying. So another way of saying that is Vedanta, the conclusion of the Vedas, right? The true doctrine. And then this is śakti-mapyajām. Chintaka means those who contemplate, those who think about. Those who think about the true teachings, the true conclusions of the Vedas or the Upanishads, right, are called Vedantists. That's a way of saying, that's why he described the Vedantins say, or Vedantists say, right? Call it avidya, right? Right, but just a very fancy. It's a beautiful. I like the language is very beautiful. That those who contemplate the true meaning of the of the Vedas, right, or Vedantins, call it avidya, right? And it says, and also he makes the translation pretty simple, right? But it's a little more complex. It says avidyāmitare, avidyāmitare, and so we're thinking, what does this word amitare mean, right? Amita means big or infinite or grand or powerful, right? So and avidya means ignorance. So the Vedantists would say it's a powerful ignorance, right? right? Powerful enough for us to see a world where there's no world, right? So that's one view of the world, right? We see a world where there's no world, right? And the example we've given before, imagine a snake from the Advaita Vedantic perspective. Imagine a rope and you see a snake, right? Well, there's no rope, there's no snake, there's only a rope. So it's ignorance. It's not true, right? But that ignorance is strong enough that we see that which is not there, right? We see a world when there's only Brahman, right? So this is not just ignorance, it's a powerful ignorance, right? Amitare means an infinite, but it probably does not mean infinite, right? It also means vast. So I'm just softening the word a little bit, most likely a powerful or vast or powerful ignorance, right? And we'd have to admit, if it is ignorance, it is a vast and powerful ignorance, right? Because it hides the truth, right? So if Maya is ignorance, it's very powerful because the one reality is not seen, right? Swami Vivekananda in the discipleship lecture, I think it's in this called the lecture called Discipleship. It's one of my favorites, a great lecture. Swami Vivekananda. There's one thing he says, so actually ignorance is easy to overcome, right? How long does it take? It should take a second. First you see first you thought it was a snake, but now you see it's a rope. In a second it's gone. But it doesn't go. That's the problem, right? It should take a second. That which is not there, we see, and that which is there, we don't see, right? So it should be, that means we should instantaneously, the ignorance should be easy to correct, but it's not easy to correct, right? It seems to be powerful, right? And this is some from the Vaishnava community, right? That philosophically argue against the Shankarite perspective, right? They sometimes focus on this point, is that you're making Maya too powerful, right? By saying there's only Brahman and Maya hides it. That means Maya can overcome Brahman, right? That making Maya more powerful than Brahman. I mean, perhaps this is also it's polemical type of argument, right? I mean, if you poke at them, they're not terribly impressive, that argument, but still it's an interesting. These are like zingers, and Shankaracharya humiliated. Imagine this as a YouTube clip or something like that. Like a gotcha moment. That are you claiming that Maya is more powerful than Brahman, right? So so it's powerful enough, right? Whatever it is, it's powerful enough that we see an infinite, big enough, or all pervasive enough that the ignorance doesn't go, it seems to be spread everywhere and not easy to overcome, right? So what the Vedantas called infinite or powerful or vast Maya, ignorance, right? So that's a classic view, right? And Advaita Vedanta has given primarily that view of Maya, right? So let's counterbalance that or counteract that, or give a different in the Shaivite, those who are experts at, well-versed in the Shaivite tradition, the Shaivite scripture, they call it vimarśa. So vimarśa is a technical term. Intelligence is not, it's not wrong, it's just incomplete, right? That's why I think we have to flesh it out a little bit, right? Find it here. So we have to be a little careful. So that vimarśa means like reflection, right? It means perception, means reflection, means awareness, right? These type of intelligence is not a wrong meaning, right? But we have to, this is the language, the word, right? But we have to connect it to a school of thought, right? Because it has to be counteracted, it has to be a counterbalance. Like you could say, some say this, others say this. Some declare this, others declare that, right? The Advaita Vedanta say this. The Shaivite, the non-dualistic Shaivites say this, right? So the non-dualistic Shaivites do not describe the world as illusion, right? So they describe, and they use the word vimarśa. So we have to understand vimarśa within that school of thought, right? And we have to be a little careful also that this is a very complicated philosophical term, right? And it can be, it has many ways to understand it, right? And so I'm not an expert at Kashmir Shaivism, right? I know experts in Kashmir Shaivism. If we wanted to maybe have a guest speaker one day to illustrate another school of thought, right? We can hopefully beam them directly from Kashmir. We have very good experts in Kashmir Shaivism that could describe vimarśa and its distinction, its difference from the Maya school, the Mayavad school of Advaita Vedanta, the school that holds that the reason we see a world is the presence of Maya, right? Instead of the Shakti of vimarśa, right? Or the power of vimarśa. So let's go a little bit. So that said, I'm not going to give a very exact and very careful. I'm going to give just an introductory kind of flow at it, go at it. So you say vimarśa is the reflective mode of consciousness, right? Right. That makes consciousness self-aware. So Vedanta and Shaivism both hold that Brahman, or Shiva for Shaivite, Brahman for Vedantas, and Shakti, Devi Bhuvaneshwari for Shaktas, right? Right. It is consciousness. She, the Divine Mother herself, has described herself as Chit and Padasam and Sambit, right? I am consciousness, right? Satchitananda, the Chit part. I am consciousness. Brahman is consciousness. The Devi is consciousness. Shiva is consciousness, right? Conscious of what? Right? If there's only one, then at least if to be conscious means to be conscious of itself, right? Or I think, but when you say, the question is, this is an interesting point that we've been contemplating lately, right? When we say that something is conscious of itself, right? Not just consciousness or conscious, but to have consciousness, conscious has to be conscious of something. So if there's nothing else, let's assume that it's at least conscious of itself, self-aware. Vimarśa means self-awareness, right? One of the definitions of vimarśa means self-awareness, reflective awareness, right? That makes the consciousness, if it's aware of itself, that makes, in a certain sense, personal, or a person. It becomes a being. If I'm aware, light is one thing, but if light understands itself, if light illuminates itself, if light is a subject of itself, right? In some sense, it's not just beingness, it's a being, right? So that's why you see in this particular view, you end up with consciousness is not just an impersonal, abstract principle of reality, it's a person. His name is Shiva in Shaivism. Her name is Bhuvaneshwari in our text, right? All right. So she's aware of herself. He's aware of himself. And in Vedanta, which we may, in the Upanishad, say it is aware of itself. But as soon as it is aware of itself, it becomes, even the Upanishads end up using he, usually he, right? You can't get away from that language. You can't use it when it's self-aware. Perhaps, I mean, some hold that you can, right? But the Kashmir Shaivism, for instance, would hold that you can't, right? When it's self-aware, that means that it's a being that's aware of himself or herself, right? Vimarśa is a reflective mode of consciousness that makes consciousness self-aware. Vimarśa, that in Shaivism, that self-awareness, making itself the subject, in a subtle, this is perhaps this is my pet way, maybe not an exactly accurate way, my pet way to understand it and to describe it, is that as soon as you make yourself the object of awareness, you've created some sort of duality, right? When you have awareness, the one, aware of itself, you have, in some sense, a sense of duality. The one who's aware and the thing that one's aware of. But the one who's aware and the thing, the one that the one's aware of is the same thing. So now you have a very interesting way of contemplating duality and multiplicity, duality and non-duality and duality. The one, that's two. So in our image of the one that two, we would maybe call that Shiva Shakti, right? Or in Vaishnava, we would say Lakshmi Narayan, perhaps, right? Radha Krishna, right? Or Shiva in Shaivism, Shiva Shakti, right? Shiva and Shakti, right? So vimarśa becomes the Devi in Shaivism. Vimarśa is a name for the Devi, a philosophical term for the Devi, the mother Shakti. And then what is that? That means that when the one's aware of itself, there's another. But what about everything we see? That's the other, right? When you're aware of yourself, you're aware of another, that's yourself, that sense of duality. Now you have the other, right? The one, that's two, that's everything, right? This is my perhaps overly simplified. I know I've Kashmiri Shaiva, those who are śaiva-śāstra-viśāradāḥ, those who are experts and knowledgeable of Shaiva-śāstra would maybe cringe at my simplification, right? But this is the way I've always kind of my own gut way of connecting to it, to this idea. The one becomes two, just in the fact that it's consciousness and conscious, and then once you have something you're conscious of, you have the many, you have everything you're conscious of, right? So it becomes when the one becomes self-aware, vimarśa becomes self-awareness, that becomes the goddess, that becomes everything in existence, right? Vimarśa is everything that exists, right? Technically it's the idam, the this, right? The aham and the idam, the me, the I, and the this, right? That's the initial duality. This painting by Dr. Argyakar, Deepta Argyakar, I mentioned, you can find I keep mentioning every week because I like his art and I want to push it. Facebook, you can look up Art Argya to look at his art. This is one of one of his paintings on the idea of vimarśa, right? That the goddess herself. Now, there's another painting he did of Shiva, half Shakti, looking at itself in the mirror. That's like the classic image, right? Shiva and Shakti looking at itself looking, creating a sense of duality, looking in the mirror. So here, the Devi herself, this is, I think, more in tune with the Shaktism of this text, right? The goddess looks in the mirror, right? And what does she see? The one consciousness, the one that's Chit and Sambit, right? Para-Brahma, right? The one who exists before anything, looks at herself in the mirror, self-reflective, right? And in this image, that mirror is a Sri Yantra. The Sri Yantra is this whole world of name and form. The initial, in the center, I think a little bit, another way I've perhaps inappropriately described Prakash Vimarśa and using the Sri Yantra, because I like to think of the Sri Yantra, it's a good tool to pin my ideas, to try to think of abstract ideas in a particular way. So we've got to mention with the idea of vimarśa, you end up prakash, you have the light of consciousness, and then that which it shines into to be self-aware, the mirror of self-reflection, of self-reflective awareness, that is the Sri Yantra. In the Sri Yantra, you have a bindu, the dot that's the original one. The bindu is the substratum of everything, right? In geometric form, we see it as a dot, the singularity, but actually it's a foundation, it's the one behind everything. Every triangle, every part of the Sri Yantra is only the bindu manifesting, it's only the one. That bindu, when I know somebody who paints yantras, an expert in tantric yantra painting, right? As per tradition, he says that when we build the bindu, we have to make it, it's only one dot, but when we paint it with two dots, right? Because the one dot has implied it's actually two dots. Those two dots, Shiva, Prakash and Prakriti, right? The one consciousness and the one that consciousness reflected, self-aware, right? But then we have to make it where those two dots are actually three dots. Because as soon as you have two, you have a third principle, relationship. Thinker, thought, thinking. Subject, object, process of awareness, right? So meditator, meditation, meditated, on the object of meditation, the meditator, and meditation, right? So that the three, right? So the one actually is two, is actually three. Though three, then if you were to blow them up, which is what happened, what's the word for evolution that we've been using? She uses, I evolved. Samaji, I've lost the word just now. Parinamavad, right? Parinamavad, it's like that which evolved. So it evolved, it expands, right? The one that's two, that's three expands. That's the central triangle of the yantra, right? That central triangle had three dots. The three original three expand to three. The one expands and it become three, right? Though three are three Shakti. This is a classic Shaivite and Shakta tantric kind of perspective, right? Those three are the three powers of Brahman, three powers of Devi, three powers of Shiva, and that's Icha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti. So power of knowledge, Jnana Shakti, power of action, Kriya Shakti, power of will or volition, Kriya Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, right? We can also put in that verse in the Upanishad describing that one energy becoming three colors, black, white, and red. Another way of saying that is Sattva-guna, Rajaguna, and Tamaguna, right? Same type of idea. All these trinities can be made in Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Creation, you can imply within those three if you want to pin your philosophy and theology and story onto this yantric idea, right? So I thought that I'm using the yantra a little bit this way, maybe inappropriately, but this is a great way to think of it. This painting showing that she looks at herself in this yantra. But there's a Shakti what's the original Shakti that creates the three powers of knowledge, action, and volition, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Icha Shakti. The initial Shakti, the initial pulse, where the one becomes two, that is the one that is two, that become three, that expands into everything. That initial pulse or spanda, right? They call svatantrya. Svatantrya. I mispronounced it. Svatantrya, right? That is svatantrya Shakti. That is in tantra, Shaivite tantra especially. This is the primary Shakti. This is the original Shakti, right? And it is inherent, right, in Shiva, in consciousness, to expand, to express, to be self-aware, right? And therefore aware of everything, to become everything, to expand itself. Like this, in this image, she looks in the mirror and she expands, right? Why? It's her nature. I've defined in the previous some lectures ago, I've described one way of understanding Shaktism is that the absolute is intrinsically energetic or intrinsically dynamic. That is this type of statement. The absolute is intrinsically dynamic means that intrinsic within consciousness is a power to expand, to express. And it's not considered a fault of consciousness. In this verse is comparing it, contrasting it to Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta would say that no, there can't be, because there can't be, vimarśa is not an appropriate understanding, right? It has to be avidya, because there can't be a second. If there's only one, there can't be a second. Brahman is supreme, therefore nothing can act upon it. Nothing. Why would it expand, right? We're misunderstanding it. It's illusion. It's ignorance, right? Because it can't expand. Because why would it do so? There's nothing for it to expand into. There's nothing acting upon itself. There's no lack to need to do something. So in Shaivite Tantra, they would say, no, it's not a matter. This is the sovereignty of the Lord. The sovereignty, we'd say the sovereignty of the goddess. They would say the sovereignty of Shiva. It's his nature to be able to do whatever he wants. And one of the things he wants to do is to expand, to be self-aware and thus expand. So Swatantriya could be free will, right? So I'll just read a little from a definition. Swatantra is the energy that emanates from the supreme Paramashiva, a wave of motion inside consciousness that acts as the fundament of the world, or another view is it's a wave of consciousness within consciousness that acts as the foundation, the cause of the world, right? Then in this is just from the philosophical text that I was reading. It is antithesis, the opposite, right, to the Vedanta concept of Brahman. That's a Brahman, and this is a different view of Brahman, which is a mere conscious witness without effective power. So they would, just like them would say, the Vedantists may critique the Shaivite as saying, oh, that your Shiva seems to be incomplete, that he feels he needs to do something, right? But their critique against the Vedanta is that your Brahman is mere consciousness with no power to do anything, right? That's a weak concept, right? So a mere conscious witness without effective power being inflicted by an illusory power, right? This is the idea that and some another, Brahman is only awareness, and it gets overwhelmed by the powerful ignorance. Ignorance seems to be more powerful, and Brahman can't do anything, can only witness what ignorance is doing. This powerful, immense ignorance, right? These avidyāmitare, right? This powerful ignorance in the Vedic perspective. So it's a very different view, right? I'll just read, this is another, my research, collecting and organizing my notes. Swatantriya is the first stage of creation, an undifferentiated energy. The first creation of Swatantriya is the energy of will, ityāhus-Shakti. Then comes the energies of knowledge, jñānaṃ-Shakti, and action, kriya-Shakti. And together with the energy of consciousness, chit-Shakti, and the energy of bliss, ananda-Shakti, they form the supreme pentad of creation, right? The so-called pure creation. These are tantric ideas of the Shuddha tattva and things like this. And how this is describing in a particular way the missing links that perhaps Sankhya holds in the evolution of prakriti, right? How from that para Brahman or paramashiva, Shiva Shakti, right? How it becomes, how that becomes prakriti. And then we know the rest, how prakriti then Purusha expand and create like this, right? But this is another very interesting view, right? Two very different views of Maya. Two, in a certain, we can say opposing views, right? But I mean, they don't have to be opposing views. There are two views. Actually, in the previous verse, it gave so many views. Some call austerity, darkness, dullness, knowledge, illusion, primordial matter, nature, Shakti, the unborn, right? These are all our ways of looking at something. How to describe, because we're describing something that's one of the problems is that we're describing something that we cannot possibly know, right? There's verses in the Upanishads. I should have written them down. I should have looked them up and written them down. I'll give you the gist. I'll see if I can remember the gist. It says that the gods themselves cannot know how this world came to be, because they came after the world. We came after the world. We're the effect. We don't know. We were not there during the cause, right? We cannot know, the effect cannot know the cause, right? In a certain sense, we're guessing, right? We can be guessing, or in another sense, we're being told. Told by whom? In the Vedas, we're being told by the Vedic mantras that reveal jnana yogin, jnana yogi, yoni, right? The womb, the Shastras are the womb. They reveal the truth, right? Without the scriptures, we cannot know anything. Brahman is revealing itself in the scriptures. Or we can interpret it a little bit more a little bit more modern, to think of the sages who've seen have tried to explain it, right? The problem, even with that view, I like this view, and that's a general view. Oh, the sages are just trying to describe in imperfect words and perfect ideas using all these different ways, right? The nature of the source, how the one became many, right? But they can't know either because they weren't there. This happened before. The gods can't know, even the sages can't know. But here, the Devi herself is speaking. She was there. This is the claim, right? Maybe this is the Devi Bhagavatam is being elevated to a Vedic scripture on par with the Vedas. The Vedas reveal the truth because they're Brahman, Brahma Yoni, right? Here, she's Brahman. She's revealing the truth. She was there, right? So she will then describe, she's describing right now different views. She described her view already from, I have a particular power, my own power that evolves out of me, that's neither real nor can't be said to exist or non-exist, right? That is, but still is always there, that united with consciousness that becomes the efficient cause, evolving, that becomes the material cause of this universe. She's describing describing how it happened from her perspective, or this school of thought perspective. And now she's also describing there's other ways to look at it, many other ways to look at it. Very beautiful, I think very beautiful verses, very beautiful ideas, right? So they don't necessarily have to be, each one of them may be contradictory and may not fit perfectly with other views, right? And so we don't have to, I don't like to take I'm in the followers of Ramakrishna, and we don't like to take a sectarian stance on one view over another. There are different views with different ways of seeing the same reality coming down in different scriptures. All those scriptures we accept as divinely inspired or revealed or eternal, or at least, important, enough for their own community, right? Different ways of looking, different communities, different traditions, different lineages, different scriptures have described how the one has become, at least seems to become, or have actually become the many, become us, Jeev and Jagat, this world. How the one has become many, while she's only one, right? So these are just possible, not possible, these are different views. I like the idea of views, darshana, different views of the same, of a great mystery. That is only a mystery, right? And I'm very nervous when people make too much of a point to claim they understand, right? This is the right view, the other views are wrong, right? We can maybe argue, minimally we can argue, right, that our school of thought has an intrinsic logic that may go against another school of thought, or our scripture says this and your interpretation means something different. You can argue that way, but I think we should be very careful about arguing, making an absolute statement about something that's so mysterious. Literally, she starts, before anything existed, I was, right? So we're dealing with that moment. And the moment, can't even say the moment after that, before time. We can't say before time, right? Because time doesn't exist yet, so we have to be really humble. I always call an ontological humility about speaking these things. We're speaking mysteries, and we're learning at the feet of the goddess here, of the sages, of the Namya Saranya, who are speaking this beautiful text, right? Or of the authors of the text, how they can describe an author of the text that come down to it, of the school of thought, the developing school of thought that has come down to us in this, in a great example of that school in this text, right? We're learning different views, a very profound view, right? Of who, what this is, who we are, where we come from, right? How the one became the many, why there's something instead of nothing, why there's everything instead of one thing, right? So there's a great mystery. Well, thank you very much for your kind attention. Are there any questions or comments? The temperature drops there.
Elijah.
Elijah.
Jai-ma.
Yeah,
Okay, I have two things, but I'm only going to say one because they're both very long. And I don't want to take up too much time. The first thing, which I'll send to the group just for time's sake, is from the Meta Suktam. in the Vedas. There's a verse that I think would be quite well related when we were talking about knowledge and its relation in the Vedas and how it's described as Maya. I think this verse would be very beneficial to send. It's just a small portion of the Meda Suktam, which I'll share in the group. But there was another one, which these both just came to my mind as we were thinking. And the second one is from the Saundarya Lahari. And this is the very first verse. The Saundarya Lahari is by Adi Shankaracharya. And this is a text that basically just is describing we could say he had a vision, or he went into a spiritual state and had seen and experienced the Divine Mother in the form of Lalita Tripura Sundari. And this text is split into two parts. You have the first part, which is sort of the philosophical perspective, and the second in worship types, and then the second describes her form. But in the very first verse, if I may read it, I find it would be beneficial. So the Sanskrit is Shiva-śakto yukto yadi bhavati shakta-prabhavitum nachedevam devo na kala kushala spanditumapi atastvam aradyam harihara virinchi divirapi pranantum stotum va katam akrita punya prabhavati. And that translates to, united with Shakti, Shiva is endowed with the power to create the universe. Otherwise, he is incapable even of movement. Therefore, who except those endowed with great merits acquired in the past can be fortunate enough to salute or praise thee, Mother Divine, who is adored with the art, who art the adored of even Hara in Virinchi. May I read for a moment from, this is Swami Tapaskananda's commentary. He says, Shiva and Shakti are the absolute being and absolute will, power, inherent in the former. Will as Shakti means the three, Icha, will, jnana, knowledge, and kriya, action. Though in abstract thought, Shiva and Shakti can be referred to separately, they are one. The inseparable being will. Being is a fiction if it is without will, and will a fancy if without its being. In their togetherness, the mighty force of the universe of becoming, comes into existence. For purposes of worship, being and will are personified as Shiva and Shakti, the father and the mother of the worlds. The word Shiva comes from the root vasati, to shine. Therefore, the word means he who is the self-conscious light of intelligence, or he who illumines, i.e. reveals the universe. It can also be derived from the root shin, to sleep or dream, and interpreted as he who negates the sleep of ignorance. Shakti means the power of manifesting the universe. Shiva, the power holder, and Shakti, the power, though one, are yet conceived as distinct in the creative process. Shakti is conceived as manifesting the universe without any way losing her inherent unity with Shiva. I feel like I could just leave it there for now, but it's interesting, the shining light of Shiva.
Yeah, no, actually the first line of that is very famous, right? That Shiva without Shakti cannot even stir. Right, that's the idea that and actually this plays on not exactly a pun, but in Sanskrit, that Shiva, the E is a energetic, feminine energetic syllable, right? And then Shiva without E or Shakti, right, is Shava, right, which means a corpse. So that Shiva without Shakti is Shava. Right, and that she cannot even stir, and that is the idea that the stirring, right? This is in Shaiva and the Shaiva scriptures, that the Devi is describing, right, is that the Prakasha, Shiva, here Prakasha, or in the Devi Bhagavatam, it's Devi herself as Prakasha, as Brahman, as awareness, is also has intrinsic a power of Shakti. That Shakti creates and expands the world, right? As through vimarśa, through the Swatantriya Shakti, Swatantriya Shakti, that expands into, as Swami Tapasyananda has quoted, Icha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti, all that this primary Shakti creates all possible Shakti. That's beautiful itself, super important. That verse is super important in a very complicated and a very super important and complicated text. Sandauriya Hari. If you haven't read it, you can.
I'll send
The translation by Swami Tapasyananda is accessible and a decent translation. Thank you. It's a very good.
Yeah, I'll send all of this too with all the rest of his commentary on this first verse, and then the part from the Medo Suktam.
Good.
Jai Ma.
Thank you. Excellent. Any other comments or questions?
Yes. Good evening, Swamiji.
Jai Ma.
Yes, thank you. Jai Ma. I will start with the simpler question first. Where do you find the sort of transliteration of the Sanskrit pronunciation that you use in your slides? Because I know it's not in C. Mackenzie Brown's edition.
Yeah. So it's true. I'm typing them out.
Oh.
Right. That's why.
So you go to the appendix that's in the Devangari, and then you just.
So we do check with that, but actually I have, what am I using lately? There's a translation by Swami Satyananda, the Kali Mandir, on the Devi Gita. I think it's called Devi Gita. And I don't use his translation, right? But he has, he gives the transliteration of the verses. Then what I do, I type those into, I use those, I retype them into a program that also allow me to generate the Devanagari, right? And then I double check. Then we double check both the translation and the Devanagari transliteration, Devanagari, with the other version that we have in Devanagari in the at the end of the Mackenzie Brown book, right? Because we could theoretically type in the Devanagari and create the transliteration, but my Devanagari is nowhere near ready for that. So I'm accustomed, due to bad habits and lack of study, to read transliteration, right? So I work with that and then generate the Sanskrit. But actually, there's a second book we suggested. It's on the information page, introduction page for the Devi Gita class, right? And it gives as a possible suggested textbook. I'm forgetting by who the author is, supposed author. The book is a little bit plagiarized. It's Swami Vijnanananda all over, probably 90% Vijnanananda without his name mentioned. So that's not. Who's the author, translate, Swamiji?
Dr. Ramurthy N.
So that book I believe, has a transliteration, right, Swamiji? I believe it has a transliteration. So that has a transliteration. So that has value, right? And it's available on Amazon fairly inexpensively. That's why I suggested it. So that has a value also. But I'm a little disappointed. I originally suggested the book not even for the transliteration, but for a alternate translation, is to have another. I've given a PDF of Swami Vijnanananda's translation, right? He's a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, right? But I'm surprised that some things, there's paragraph after paragraph that are identical. So his translation is not exactly a translation. Still valuable. It's got to see the light of day, but good manners shows that you do not pass somebody else's translation as your own. But so that's also available. So you'd have that. That's probably the easiest way to get. And because then you'd automatically have another translation, which has value. It's not bad.
Also, Guruji, before class, I wanted to tell you we just discovered a new website.
Oh.
I will post I tried typing it. No, it didn't really work, did it? Anyway, but it's aksharamukha.appspot.com.
Aksharamukha. Mhm.
Why? Because I misspelled it. But and what it does is if you can find a digital version of the Devanagari, it will convert it into transliteration and vice versa.
Okay.
And it will, basically transfer it into almost any language. It's a very impressive.
Okay, great.
I'll try to retype it correctly.
Okay. Michael, you had a
Yeah, I was going to say there's really just a few verses that I want is the Navasloki Devi Gita. So I don't know. I'll see if I can put it together on my own, and maybe I'll ask.
Yeah, I may have. I think the Navasloki Devi Gita. I may have. Let me look. I think I typed that out one time because I wanted to learn it.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't learn it, but I typed it out. At least that.
Okay.
So I may have it. I mean, you can work on it, but let me look around. I have to click around in my files, but I think I did want it because that's a nice, the idea. It also, I mean, this is a fairly late edition, but it's a way of meditating on core verses. It has its own charm.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure he doesn't give it.
Some of them were covered tonight, or at least one of them.
Yes. Yeah. He doesn't give it. Okay. I don't. Navasloki, verse 41. Let me double check real quick. Yeah, he doesn't. That's his point. He gives a translation of the 9, but not the.
Yeah.
No, I think I figured I typed it out, but if not, I think all of them have been covered. So if nothing else, I think all the verses have been discussed already. So I have them all transliterated. So if I haven't already done it, I can probably easily put them together for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the more substantive question. There seems to be, well, maybe it's more of a comment. There seems to be a tension between, like Maya is covering me.
Yeah.
And Maya is me.
Yeah.
Like there are verses that say, well, I project my Maya and then I withdraw it. Through my power of revelation.
Yeah.
And you said at one point that the Devi has infinite powers, which means that her power of Maya would be just one of infinite powers, which makes it an infinitesimal part of her power.
Yeah.
But also, when we're discussing the absolute, the part is the whole. So that means that her Maya is her. So we're, so where do we land on that? How do we resolve that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's when you think of every part being the infinite, being the whole, right? This gets very like poetic and ontologically poetic. Very hard to like comprehend it, right? Because when we're talking about parts and wholes, right? Parts. We could actually, there's some have used this kind of idea like fractal reality. That's the term where every part has, was it? Is that right? Or fractal.
Yeah.
Fractal. I think there's some idea where the parts are containing the whole like that as a updated way of conceptualizing how the parts are the whole itself, right? And even like but in common, I want to say common. I don't want to be. I'm not dismissing it or belittling or lowering it, but in common, in popular or common devotional conception, right? We think, oh, God is all powerful, right? And his powers are his powers, are not. Each thing that he does is not equal to him, but we don't have to think of it that way because everything. Like if God's merciful. Oh, mercy is infinite. His infinite mercy, right? If you have all these infinite things, you can't have more than one infinite thing, right? In a certain sense, mathematics. I guess I'm just remembering one of our friends who went back to school for math to take advanced mathematics where you have multiple infinities. But I don't understand that, but apparently that's a thing, right? But if you think of but if you think there's one infinite thing, then everything you say about that thing is simply describing in imperfect language the one infinite thing, right? Perhaps that's a way of understanding it, right? We think of it as an aspect of it, but there is no aspect in the one, right? I mean, in a certain sense, aspects are only describing in limited language the unlimited one, right? But the unlimited one never becomes it's not limited by such expansion, such and so yeah, so we can leave it like that. I don't know, it's a very good and complicated, subtle thing to think about for sure. Yeah. But one thing you mentioned that there's some tension between these two views of reality, these two views of Maya, right? And I think I read this little section maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago from the commentary, right? One of his, I don't really read out loud from his commentary, but I'll says I'll reread this as just because now we've taken another swipe at this, right? The Devi Gita, with its inclusivist approach, frequently conjoins Shakta and Advaita points of view. The Advaita perspective on the Supreme Brahman is the one primal reality having the nature of infinite being, consciousness, and bliss, easily augmented the Shakta perspective on the goddess as supreme. Less accommodating is the Advaita view of the illusory world and the power responsible for creating it. Yet such is the intellectual prestige of Advaita that the Devi Gita does not hesitate to propound its teachings, even when these are in tension, when there are tensions between Advaita and Shakta perspectives, right? And I think that's an interesting, I brought this up in my own ways a few times, right? Is that she's teaching Vedanta. Perhaps we could say that it's almost necessary. It's part of the prestige and the pedigree, right, of the philosophy. And in the next section, she'll really teach Advaita Vedanta with a harsh distinction between unconscious ignorance and Brahman, right, and consciousness, right, using a very strong language, right. But we shouldn't lose the fact that she has to present Vedantic teachings. The text has to present Vedantic teachings and Vedic teachings, right? Because of their importance, their popularity, and their fame, their prestige, right? And they are legitimately famous at the time, right? Even now, they're famous. They're very impressive and very prestigious, right? We can't ignore it. Just, oh, we have our own sectarian view. We ignore the Upanishads and 1,000 years of commentary on them, that doesn't seem to be appropriate either, right? But the way I'm approaching the text, we're presenting we're taking the text as they present, even though the more partially Advaitic views of the unreality of the world in some sense, right, from the larger tradition that the text is presenting, and even what the immediate text, the Devi Gita is presenting, and the Devi Bhagavatam presenting, that it's her manifesting as both the efficient cause and material cause. That statement, we go back to her own self-revelation. I am the efficient cause and the material cause of the world, right? We can use that as our interpretive foundation, even when describing views that don't say that, right? I think it's so important just because of that tension. I think it's very interesting. But all right. Thank you. Any other? Ranmali.
Swamiji, Guruji, it would be so great to have someone come and talk on Shaivism, Kashmiri Shaivism. That would be fantastic.
I will be the Kashmir Shaiva Seminary, not the Ramakrishna Seminary.
Just like
but it's good, I'm joking. But no, we have actually, we have a local friend here that's very qualified, right? But then I'm thinking actually maybe one day the time difference is not bad with our friend George in Kashmir, disciple of Swami Lakshmanju. He's a beautiful, gentle, and very clear way of describing these things, right? And charming.
That would be good.
He's an expert teacher in himself, living his whole life with Swami Lakshmanju. So
That would
maybe
be,
have him.
I'm going to go through the chat because I just put notes in the chat. And so like when you were talking about the Rig Veda 10:129, so the Nashadiya Sukta, that's the creation.
Yeah.
And I've read
I missed the name. I didn't write down the name. Thank you. Yes.
The Max Muller translation of that. I mean, the paradox of creation, but like not of non-existence. I think it's really good. You know, there are some aspects of it that are just
very good.
Anyway, and then I was just looking this up when you talked about the Prajna Parada, and then when it's in the when you look at like mental cognitive dis-ease, you're looking at like the Charaka Samhita, and you're talking about this. They address the aspect of Prajna Parada, and it is related to the Chitakeshas, right? That's like avidya, asmita, like like ahankara, raga, dvesha, and moha. So it's really interesting to kind of see the correlation of moha, raga, and dvesha as being the primary foundations, according to the Samhita, Charaka Samhita, as being the cause of a lot of mental disturbance, right? That happens because of this concept of Prajna Parada, you know, and so it was just interesting to make those connections.
Actually, in Kashmir Shaiva and the like, also they have to, because this is not being described here, and she's going to take a difference. Her evolution into the world is going to be a little taking a different line, right? But in Kashmir Shaivism, some texts and some descriptions or the Kashmir Shaivism will describe, right, how you get how Shiva becomes a world, how Shiva becomes individuals, how the one becomes many, how Shiva, who's infinite, becomes limited, right? And some of these points, these are these coverings, self-coverings by his own Shakti and his own will, because he's perfectly sovereign, right? You can't do anything to limit his sovereignty is blasphemy and heresy, right? To say Shiva can't do something, right? And so he's doing everything. So things he's done is create a world of illusion and bound beings, right? Himself, and so one of the things he does it is through dvesha and ahamkara, and these remind me that my brain has got
avidya, ahankara, raga, dvesha.
So these are attachment and aversion and ignorance. These are universal. These are foundational principles that Shiva himself creates in order to cover himself, right? And so this is not the language that Devi's use. That's the thing where she mentions the Shaivite view of vimarśa in one half a verse, right? The text is not on Kashmir Shaivism, right? But she's going to describe how she becomes everything differently, right? Using a different language, a different image, a different evolutionary scheme, right? Not unrelated, right? But in the Kashmir Shaivas have a very interesting way of how Shiva puts on the avarana, these coverings, by which he becomes as if or actually us, and limited, bound beings, right? He said, well, why would he do that? He obviously wants to because he did it, right? That's his sovereignty, right? And nothing can touch his sovereignty. He's Ishvara, he's the Lord, right? With infinite Shakti and Swatantriya. He's fully he has self-ability to do everything, and that's what he's doing, right? So here we are, right?
Right. And then the last thing was the vimarśa. Actually, vimarśa is in Pali, in Sinhalese, it's actually someone's name, and you pronounce it vimarśa as well. But I found in the definition of vimarśa, and I put it on the chat from the Varivashya Rahasya, and it's that I like that. That part.
Yeah, actually, I also have that. I I thought I
as
wrote
the
it down.
inherent pulsation,
Yeah. Let me see.
the
If I
form
have
of vimarśa, a divine deliberation, or
yeah.
abides Shakti.
As the
That's
inherent
all.
pulsation of the form of vimarśa abides Shakti and united with Shiva, united with that indeed, Shiva creates the world, protects it, and finally absorbs it within himself. Is that principle of vimarśa? I also found that verse, and it's in my notes like that. I didn't get to,
Yeah.
but very good. Yeah, but I
That's
like the
all.
fact that I mean she approaches. She doesn't say one over the other, but she mentions two powerful, impressive views. Explanation, and you can see, and in a certain sense, either one of them is sufficient to describe if you accept the principle. The thing is, none of these you can also say, no, I don't accept that. That's not sufficient, or not satisfying, or find some flaw in it. Others look at those things, oh, that's perfectly reasonable. That makes sense to me. That's enough, right? The Advaita view is a way of describing. Maybe that's sufficient. The Shaivite view is a way of understanding. The Shakti. There's all. I mean, you can use a more classical Christian and Abrahamic view. That's how did it happen? God makes it happen, but he speaks it into existence. It didn't exist, and now it exists only because God holds them to existence. If he did not have his continuous creative act, we'd cease to exist. We don't exist before our existence. That's another view. We can look at that and go, well, that doesn't satisfy me, or we can think, well, that profoundly satisfies me. That moves me. Right. I look at all these things and said, all these are moving. Right. I tend personally towards one view. That's my kind of my worldview. Right. My like that, my theological worldview. Right. But I have no, we pride ourselves, maybe we shouldn't pride, but we pride ourselves to be able to move and between these even opposing views, maybe not opposing, but between in what the term is when you they can't both be true, incompatible views, right? Incompatible. Actually, there's a interesting, we haven't mentioned so much I think in the early classes we mentioned process theology, right? And this is a very profoundly sophisticated view of God and reality, right? But I was listening to some lectures. I was on a process theology kick a couple summers ago, trying to grasp it. The concepts are a little bit above can't say above, but I haven't studied enough of it to even get some basic concepts. A very complicated, sophisticated philosophical, theological view, right? By Whitehead. It was founded by Whitehead, a mathematician, philosopher of mathematics. But they have a view of pluralism, a religious pluralism that I think is maybe close, maybe a way, I can't say close to what Sri Ramakrishna said, another way of understanding what Sri Ramakrishna said, saying it another way, is that that God is infinite power that's always trying to manifest, right? Trying to bring out good, trying to bring out love, right? And he will act upon different people, different minds, different cultures differently. Each one in a way that may be incompatible with another, right? So there's not so that you have one particular view of reality and creation and God and salvation completely at odds with another view, and they're both true because both of them are God acting upon different communities, different people, different minds, right? It's very interesting. I like this particular kind of perspective. We can see and even views that are contradictory, right? It's like and I'm flashing on too many hours at coffee houses in high school, and reading Walt Whitman poetry, right? This is that time, Walt Whitman is like what is it? I am
large. I am large. I am so large. I embrace paradox.
Is it paradox or is it or contradiction?
Maybe it is contradiction.
I think I'm so large. I'm large. I embrace contradiction. Something like this, right? So, anyways, it's I thank you, Swami. I mean, I'm embarrassed that I think I've drank a lot of coffee during this talk, but not enough to remember Walt Whitman poetry that I haven't read in 35 years. But thank you. Anything else? Getting late. Last chance. So a little program note. I'm not sure if we can meet next week. We are getting ready, Ambika and myself, to travel to India, and we may need. I'm not quite sure how our preparation time is coming, so I'm not quite sure if we can manage the preparation required to be able to do the class without embarrassment, to be able to have something to say, intelligent thing to say that justifies people spending a couple hours with us, right? So I'm not quite sure. We'll maybe Monday or Tuesday we can know, but my guess is we may be overwhelmed and not ready to give a class, in which case we're going to spend early part of July, the first part of July, out of country. So we'll have to put a temporary halt until probably the third week of July, and we'll be back. Until then, soon, I think maybe the first week after, I'm not quite sure which weekend, within a week or two after, as July starts, revered Swami Chaitananda Ji Maharaj will be in Laguna, and he'll be giving satsangs on Saturday nights, and we'll post those on Facebook and YouTube, and those who are local can go online on our website and find out how to attend if you'd like to attend. We have some limited parking and things like that, but we're most likely we haven't got the exact dates, which dates he's here, which dates he's gone, but most likely he'll be here the whole summer. And so while we're gone, at least the satsangs can continue with Swami Chaitananda. Very nice to have him back. And we'll see when we come back how we jump back in. We're having some meditations on how to spend as soon as we return that part of the summer, both recording some live lectures for the seminary, for previous courses, redoing previous courses and new courses, as well as maybe restarting the subtle anatomy. It's been 2 years we did the subtle anatomy, and I think there's a lot of people who didn't take it, and a lot of new students that are interested. So we may re-give that with pre-recorded lectures and live question and answers, maybe in August or something like that. Something to look forward to. So thank you for your kind attention. If we don't see you next week, and we don't see you personally before then, we'll see you in late July. So either next Wednesday or late July. Thank you for your kind attention. This has been great fun, and I'm anxious to keep going because next section is also really nice. All right. Joy Ma. You see who's here. Jai Ma. Giri.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma. Everyone is in Giri and Durga. Everyone is completely in love with little Vijay from the puja, and every picture is adorable. He was a star.
Yeah, he's very photogenic.
Very photogenic. So sweetly disposed,
Yes.
And this is what happens, I think, when you're giving so much love and attention and affection. This is the way.
Yeah, as he's carrying the cat.
Yeah. We're not seeing that part. There was no cat's tail to pull when he was here, so we see him in his best behavior.
Although he was mesmerized by the Mangalasi, though, I must say.
And made quite a mess.
It was fun.
He was mesmerized.
Uh-huh.
Swamiji. Swamiji, I'm going to be with you for a month in India. You can't do this right now. You're going.
I'm going to be with you for 5 days. I can't. I can't do it.
Jai Ma. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Hariom. How do I get out of this?
Jai Ma Swamiji,
Jai
Jai
Ma,
Ma Elijah.
Swamiji
I'm
ki
so
jai.
sad that I'm gonna miss you
Jai Ma
coming,
Ranui.
but
Thank you.
have a
Thank you
wonderful.
so much for your donation.
No. Just I'm so
It
happy
means so
to.
much. So much.
Jai Ma.
Seriously.
It
Thank
will
you.
be wonderful.
Jai Ma.
Jai Ma.